Hear these words from 1 Corinthians chapter 13. If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions, and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient, love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. But as for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. For we know only in part, and we prophesy only in part. But when the complete comes, the partial will come to an end. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part. Then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. And now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, but the greatest of these is love. These are absolutely beautiful words that are probably very familiar to us if we've ever been to a service of matrimony, to any form of wedding. They're very commonly used in the wedding rite. I think, like some verses in our Christian tradition, perhaps they are a little too familiar. And so I would like to give us one more opportunity to hear these words. And I'm going to change translation a little bit because maybe you'll hear something that you didn't hear before, or you'll see a slight difference in the translation that may spark something. So hear again these words from 1 Corinthians chapter 13. If I speak in tongues of human beings and of angels, but I don't have love, I'm a clanging gong or a clashing cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and I know all the mysteries and everything else, and if I have such complete faith that I can move mountains, but I don't have love, I am nothing. If I give away everything that I have and hand over my own body to feel good about what I've done, but don't have love, I receive no benefit whatsoever. Love is patient. Love is kind. It isn't jealous. It doesn't brag. It isn't arrogant. It isn't rude. It doesn't seek its own advantage. It isn't irritable. It doesn't keep a record of complaints. It isn't happy with injustice, but is happy with the truth. Love puts up with all things, trusts in all things, hopes for all things, endures all things. Love never fails. As for prophecies, they will be brought to an end. As for tongues, they will stop. As for knowledge, it will be brought to an end. We know in part and we prophesy in part. But when the perfect comes, what is partial will be brought to an end. When I was a child, I used to speak like a child, reason like a child, think like a child. But now that I have become a man, I've put an end to childish things. Now we see a reflection in a mirror. Then we will see face to face. Now I know partially, but then I will know completely in the same way that I have been completely known. Now faith, hope, and love remain, these three things, and the greatest of these is love. Just as kind of a refresher of where we've been and where Paul is kind of traveling with his message, we are facing down Paul's issue that he seems to be weaving into 1 Corinthians and to the church at Corinth, the issue of disunity. He has presented a case for why unity is not only the better ideal, but also the way of Christ, the way towards the kingdom, and also how unity is not just an end, means to an end, but is actually the way that we are supposed to be in relationship with God and with one another. And now he adds another element. Now, don't forget though that we've also been talking about gifts. He's been talking about spiritual gifting and the challenges that the church has been having in a little competition going on between those that have certain spiritual gifts and those that have others. And so we also add that element into this text here, which is why we're not just talking about love, but we're also referencing love to those other spiritual gifts, such as prophecy and tongues. And so Paul is pulling back to his earlier material, as any good writer would, and is saying that he's expanding on this concept that unity is not just about what gifts you have. It's not just about using those gifts, in a spectacular fashion. Unity is not just about being of one mind and one purpose, but really he's culminating in this concept that unity in God's sight means love. Love that is never ending, always tolerant, always kind, love that doesn't seek to compete. And as he finishes in the end of that chapter, a very short chapter, which is often called just the love chapter, it's also the only gift that's going to stick around to eternity. Love is the only thing that God has given us, not only for our own reception of his love, but has given us for others, that's going to outlast everything. And Paul's little talk about seeing in a mirror dimly towards the end is his way of saying that we may not quite understand that. We may not quite see what it means to love and to be loved in an eternal fashion, but eventually we will know. C.S. Lewis describes love this way. Love is not affectionate feeling, but a steady wish for the loved person's ultimate good as far as it can be obtained. So we're clearly not talking about romantic love, even though the love chapter is absolutely gorgeously used in weddings. We're not talking here in Paul's case about romantic love. Instead, C.S. Lewis sums it up as that steady wish for a person's ultimate good, as far as we can get it here in this life. Hence, Paul talking about how we don't quite have it all yet. We don't have all of the knowledge, all of the understanding. What does it mean to love like that? What does it mean to love in a way that we desire another person's, not ours, ultimate good? That we desire not just the best for them in terms of our human understanding, but the capital THE possible best in God's understanding. How can we look at others through God's lens of love? Not our human lens, which, as Paul compares, is to a mirror, kind of a reflection of God's love, an incomplete picture. He understands that we'll probably never, and he's helping teach, that we'll probably never get it perfectly, but that doesn't mean we don't stop trying. The reason Paul talks about maturing in his understanding as in terms of knowledge is he's also encouraging the people that they need to mature in their understanding of love. We will never achieve perfect love here on earth, but we strive toward it. And we strive toward perfect love not as we imagine it as humanity imagines it, because when humanity gets involved, we get we get into the messy things. Is a person's ultimate good just having a roof over their heads? Or is a person's ultimate good just having a job? Or we get into, these debates. Religions got into the debates for years. Even churches saying things like the ultimate good of a woman is to have a child. And if we follow along with those human understandings of the ultimate good, we will eventually get caught up in problems. We will eventually get caught up in limitations. The kingdom doesn't have limitations. Paul is speaking about doing absolutely everything right for the kingdom. Absolutely all performance correct. Everything that looks good on paper. Unity on paper, working towards, a unified mission, all of that on paper that looks fantastic. You can do all of that. And if you don't have the ultimate love that God has provided and God calls us to have for one another, it's not just that you're doing nothing. Paul could have said that. He could have said that his actions were worthless. He could have said that if he is, and he does say that a little bit, he's just a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal, but he goes further and says, if I don't have love, I am nothing. In Paul's view, if we do not have, display as well as accept the love of God, not only are we doing nothing, not only are what we up to is kind of pointless, but our existence is pointless. Absolutely worthless. Them some pretty rough words there, Paul. Paul is looking at life, looking at the mission of God, looking at the kingdom of God, and saying, if I don't do every single thing that I do towards the kingdom actively with love, I might as well not exist. I might as well not even be here. What is my point? Paul digs into, in those 13 verses, an awful lot. We talk about how gifts or the other giftings that they're fighting over are temporary. We talk about the nature of what God's love is like. We have these descriptions in the center verses of this chapter. But the central message of what Paul is getting at is that this love that he is describing to us is what gives us our very purpose in life. And we can think about that from a God way, as in God's love that's given to us is our very purpose. And we can become a little hyper-focused on that, and that's often sometimes where we go. That the purpose of who we are as Christians is to receive God's love. And sometimes we as Christians, we have a tendency to say that that's, we say things like we're saved from sin, we're saved from hell, we're saved from torment. That God's love is all about what has been done for us and what we got out of the situation. But there's a stronger depth to what Paul is saying, and saying that it's not just about the love we receive from God being our purpose, but the love that we share in the name of the kingdom of God that is also our purpose. Sometimes Christians talk about what they're saved for. What is, okay, great, we're saved from sin, we're saved from eternal death. Now what? It's the eternal question. What's my purpose? What are we saved for? And this is Paul giving us those words. We exist to display as well as receive the love of God. And the descriptors that Paul puts for love here in these central verses of this chapter may seem like an insurmountable task. The amount of times that in our lives we want to be rude and we want to have our way and we want to achieve things for ourselves, and we use the word love. Oh, that was a loving way to tell that person that. And we use it kind of as a double-edged sword sometimes. Paul is describing a perfection that is hard to accomplish, that is difficult to reach. Lots of what Paul is saying, his difficult words, is challenging those that are hearing his words. Those that heard his words read, most likely, in the city and the church of Corinth, and those that are hearing and reading his words generations ahead, even today. He's definitely challenging us to a level of godly perfection that is hard to attain, but he desires us to mature into. God desires us to mature into. Love is not just the greatest gift that we receive from God. It is the greatest gift on behalf of the kingdom of God that we give to others. And when we look at those words again, when we look at those words that say the love that we are called to give by God, the love that is our central purpose of existence, is supposed to be patient. Patient. Something we're not very good at as a human species in general. I want it now. All I can think of is Veruca Salt from the original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. I want it now. It's true then, it's true before, it's true now. Love is patient. True love, God's love, overcomes that now desire. Love is kind. What does it mean to be kind? Does it mean just not causing harm? Or does it mean actively going out of your way to enhance someone's life? Is it nice just to not let the door hit someone in the face? Or is it nice to actively open the door? Kindness. Being nice, being kind means more than just avoiding doing harm, but means actively putting something good into someone's life. Love isn't jealous. We're pretty good at jealousy. We're jealous of the next door neighbor when they get the awesome tool that we haven't had a chance to get. We're jealous of the mom down the street when she's got the awesome van, for all of her kids. We're jealous of the person who has the job that pays a lot more than ours does. It's natural to feel this sense of jealousy, this sense of wanting something we don't have, and being, if not actively being in animosity with someone about it, at least harboring in our hearts this sense of, I want what they have, or I want something different. Love doesn't brag. How many of us brag? Social media is perfect for bragging. We post pictures of the perfect meal, of the perfect workout, of the perfect makeup, of how good we were that, we went to McDonald's and didn't get the iced coffee, but got something, lighter. And social media is just set up perfectly for bragging. Now, let me be clear. We've bragged for a very long time as humans. Social media didn't start it, but we see it a lot on social media. Love. A love that desires the ultimate good for another isn't out there boasting about how great it is. We who are people who are called to love are not supposed to be sitting here deciding, how awesome our political ideals, religious ideals, sociological ideals, parent raising, children raising styles, how much better they are than someone else's. Oh, I'm just trying to help you out because I think that my way is better than your way. Love isn't arrogant. kind of ties into those other ones. That arrogance is something we often kind of associate with bragging. The idea that love does not seek to puff up its own chest. We don't love someone else or engage in love, God's love, with someone else so that we can make ourselves feel better. Love isn't rude. Are there times when in love you might have to challenge a person? Yes. But there are also plenty of times where we have used it under the guise of it was a loving response when it was really just an opportunity to say something rude. And I'm not speaking specifically to our culture. The reason that this list exists when Paul wrote it so long ago is because we've done the same things for a long period of time. So no, I'm not calling out any particular culture or generation today in our time. Paul is calling out the way that we use love, that word and that supposed action, in negative ways. Love doesn't seek its own advantage. How can I get something better or achieve something more if I love this person? We've all probably prayed a prayer somewhere in our lives that says, Lord, if I do this for you, can you do this for me? Like, if I win the lottery, I promise I'll go to church for every single Sunday, even the game days. There are times when we think that loving God means having a trade-off where we get some sort of a bonus. And loving others is about the trade-off where we get something as a perk. I give to this organization because I know it gets me a tax benefit. I give to this person because I know they'll repay me sevenfold later on. Love isn't irritable. It's a hard one. We get frustrated and irritated really quickly, particularly when something just isn't comfortable for us. When we love others that are outside maybe our sphere, that kind of comfort zone, that little kind of boundary that we set for ourselves in our ministry and in our lives. When we love someone outside of that and maybe things don't go the way we want and we have a tendency to get a little irritated. Love doesn't keep a record of complaints. While I'm not going to get into the psychology of the bringing up past situations in an argument or something like that, and I'm not going to go there because that's entirely different territory. We know of the amount of times when, even if it's not in your own family, maybe it's in a family of someone you know, that there's this record of situations when the parent was supposed to be loving the child, and instead what you hear is, well, I have to deal with you doing this all day and that all day, and I have to listen to you whine, and I wiped your butt, and I cared for you when you were sick, and those kind of things are used against us or others in a way that is not loving. Love does not keep a record of complaints. It means that it doesn't keep in the back of its mind all the things that you did wrong and why you should deserve the love you're getting because of all the things you've done in the past. God doesn't look at our past sins and say, well, you should be grateful for the love I'm giving you. And we are not called to love one another in that fashion. Love isn't happy with injustice, but is happy with the truth. This is the first one that Paul puts in here, a flip-flop, as in love doesn't like injustice, but likes truth. So is making sure that it's not just a matter of hating injustice or hating lies or hating evil, but it's also about actively seeking the truth. It's not enough to just say and denounce something that is unjust or evil and stop there, but rather we also have to seek and love the truth, the right situation. So often we as humans are okay with the saying, oh no, this is bad, but a little less on the ball with saying, and this is the way we should be going, because this is what's good and right and true in comparison to that bad thing. Love puts up with all things, trusts in all things, hopes for all things, endures for all things. The last is basically a reiteration of what he had been saying in the previous verses. It sustains throughout challenges. It stays the course, even when our human concept of love is based on ups and downs. I love this person when they're nice to me or when they're someone I like, and I don't love this person when they've done something I don't like. God's love is constant. It exists no matter what we do, what others do. And that's not just God's love to us. That's how we're called to show God's love to others. Now, if you look at this list and go, that's pretty hard, Paul. Yeah. Which is why, again, he goes down a little bit further and says that there's a maturing into love, an understanding that we may not quite get it all right here, but we probably won't quite get it all right here. As a matter of fact, if we're honest with ourselves, we definitely won't get it all right here in this earthly plane, in this moment, but we are maturing from that childish understanding to a greater understanding of what it means to be loved and to love one another as our very purpose. If you think that these things that love does and love is are just throwaway terms, or, that's the ideal, that would be perfection, Paul is saying these are what we strive to for our very existence. If Paul were to answer in this moment when he is writing to this church the question of why am I here, Paul's answer to that question would be to be loved by God and to love others like God. In all of these ways, in all these patient, kind, not jealous, not bragging, not arrogant, not rude, not seeking our own advantage, not irritable, not keeping a record of complaints, not being happy with injustice, but loving the truth. If we are to love in all of those ways, in that way is our very purpose. Which leaves us with a bit of a to-do list. It leaves us with a bit of self-analysis. It leaves us with a bit of, does my love, the love that I bestow on behalf of God, does it look like that? Is it, as C.S. Lewis says, seeking the ultimate good for the person we are showing love to? Love isn't about ourselves. It's not about what we achieve and just about what we have been given, but it's also about what we give others and how we give to them for their good. Not our ego, not our desires, for their good. as it ties back to unity, this is what Paul is saying. Unity can only be achieved, Christian unity, what he's speaking about in this letter, can only be achieved if we love like that. As a matter of fact, it won't even be hard to achieve if we love like that. If we truly love as selflessly as this text suggests, teaches, encourages, says we should mature onto, if we indeed love that selflessly, unity will just happen. If we care more about the other than about ourselves, unity is naturally going to come into the mix. Paul says, stop worrying about who's got the best gift. Stop worrying about whether certain gifts are more important. Stop worrying about whether other teachers think they've got more awesome messages for you. And instead, start worrying about how you love. And in that moment, unity will begin to be achieved. And I suspect from the way that Paul writes, he doesn't think unity will be achieved any other way. The unity of the Christian life, of the unity of the kingdom, is only truly achievable if we love as God loves. So get out there and show some of God's love today and all days.